It was a bitterly cold evening in Jackson, Wyoming. The kind of night where the wind bites at your skin and the snow seems to fall heavier with each passing moment. The Williams family had been driving home from a long weekend getaway, their hearts light and full of laughter, a sense of togetherness in the warmth of their SUV. John and Lisa, Max's parents, had their minds on nothing but the upcoming holiday, the plans they'd made, and the joy of simply being a family. Their 2-year-old son, Maximum, had fallen asleep in his car seat, his tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the road. But fate, it seems, has a way of altering the course of our lives in an instant. A sudden curve on the icy mountain road caught John off guard, and before he could react, their SUV slipped on a patch of black ice. The vehicle careened off the road, the tires failing to grip the slick surface. In an agonizing moment, it plummeted down a steep embankment, crashing through the trees, tumbling, spinning in a violent dance before finally coming to a halt against a jagged rock. The sound of crumpling metal and shattering glass ringing in the cold, silent night. John and Lisa were unconscious, their bodies thrown about inside the vehicle as the force of the crash took its toll. The darkness outside was now complete, save for the faint glow of a moon hidden behind thick clouds. Maximum, still strapped into his car seat, was alive but crying. His small, terrified sobs filled the otherwise eerie silence of the forest, echoing off the trees. The cries didn't go unnoticed. Not far from the wreckage, in the dense thicket of trees, a large grizzly bear was foraging. Bears, in their primal instincts, are drawn to the sounds of distress, the scent of blood. The wind carried the unmistakable mix of scents, the pungent tang of fresh blood and the soft, desperate wails of the child. For a moment, the bear hesitated, sniffing the air. A low growl rumbled in its chest. And then, something changed. What the bear did next was something that defies every expectation, every stereotype. Rather than an instinct to attack or flee, this bear seemed drawn to the cry of the child. The pure, helpless sound of a tiny soul calling out in the cold night. The bear approached the wreckage slowly, cautiously, its massive paws making no sound as it moved through the snow. The vehicle was mangled, its windows shattered, and the interior was a scene of chaos. Yet, among all the broken glass and twisted metal, there was Maximum. The little boy's face, wet with tears, glistened in the dim light. His wide, fearful eyes searched the wreckage, unable to understand why he was alone, why his parents weren't there to comfort him. The bear, almost as though it recognized the child's vulnerability, did something extraordinary. It carefully, deliberately, reached into the vehicle with its powerful claws, avoiding the sharp edges of the metal, and gently tugged Max from his car seat. The child's cries ceased, as if he understood that the bear wasn't a threat but something else entirely. The bear's enormous, shaggy form, though fearsome in appearance, was, in that moment, a figure of quiet strength and compassion. With remarkable tenderness, the bear cradled Max in its massive arms, lifting him with ease as though he were nothing more than a cub itself. It was a moment of profound empathy, an unspoken understanding between the two, Maximum vulnerable and frightened, and the bear, whose instinct for survival had somehow been tempered by an ancient, inexplicable gentleness. The bear turned, its large body moving gracefully through the snow, each step calculated, careful. It made its way through the trees, heading deep into the forest, away from the wreckage, away from human eyes. Maximum, still in shock but no longer crying, allowed himself to be carried. The warmth of the bear's fur against his cheek, the rhythmic padding of its paws against the cold earth, seemed to lull him into a strange sense of calm. He was safe, for now, in the care of an animal that, by all rights, should have been a danger to him. Instead, it became his protector, his guide, in a world suddenly stripped of the safety he had known. In the midst of the harsh winter night, while the wind howled above and the trees whispered their secrets, an unspoken bond formed between a small child and a wild creature. It was a bond that would change both their lives forever. Max's parents, still unconscious in the wreckage, remained unaware of what had just occurred. But in the quiet of the forest, a different story was beginning to unfold, one of survival, of unexpected compassion, and of a connection that transcended the boundaries of species. The bear, who could have easily seen Max as prey, had instead chosen to protect him. And Maximum, for reasons unknown, had chosen to trust in the bear. Neither of them understood it. Not in the way humans would try to explain. But there was something in that moment, a lesson in empathy. A glimpse of something greater than fear or survival. And so, the bear carried Max through the dark woods, deeper into the wilderness, where a new journey would begin for them both. A journey that would test their strength, their trust, and ultimately reveal the profound and mysterious nature of the bond they had forged under the cold, watchful eyes of the night sky. Max's first few hours with the bear felt like a strange dream, one where reality and fantasy blurred. The forest around him was vast, silent, and unfamiliar. The bear moved with a quiet confidence, navigating through the snow-dusted pines and over rough terrain. Max was no longer crying, though his small heart pounded in his chest, unsure of where he was being taken, or why. His mind, still clouded by the chaos of the crash and the terror of being alone, couldn't comprehend what had happened, only that this animal, this huge, formidable creature, was somehow keeping him safe. They reached a secluded cave after what seemed like hours of wandering. The bear, still holding Max gently in its arms, finally stopped at the entrance, a dark opening in the rock surrounded by tall, silent trees. The cave was warm, sheltered from the biting cold of the winter night. The bear lowered Max carefully onto a patch of soft moss inside, its large head watching him closely. Maximum, feeling the warmth of the cave settle around him, instinctively curled into a ball on the ground. The bear, satisfied with its choice of shelter, sat down nearby, its heavy body still. For a while, they simply stayed there, the bear watching over the boy with a curious gaze, and Maximum too tired to feel afraid, closing his eyes in a restless sleep. He was still too young to fully understand the gravity of what had just happened, but he felt an odd sense of comfort in the presence of the bear. Despite the strangeness of it all, Max felt safe. Days passed in the cave, and with each one, Max and the bear's bond deepened. The boy, in his innocence, began to mimic the bear's movements, his little hands and feet copying the way the bear moved through the forest. At first, it was a form of simple curiosity. He watched the bear's mighty paws as they treaded through the snow, and he followed its every movement with wide, trusting eyes. The bear, in turn, seemed to tolerate Max's presence, occasionally nudging him gently with its nose or guiding him when he wandered too far. It was as though the bear was teaching Max to survive. The boy learned to eat the berries and roots the bear dug up from the earth, his tiny hands shaking as he reached for the food. At first, he resisted, his mind craving the safety of familiar foods. But soon enough, hunger began to overpower the discomfort. In time, Max began to enjoy the raw, earthy taste of the food the bear provided, just as the bear had been doing for years. The bond between them was not one of necessity alone, it was evolving into something deeper, more profound. Back in the town, search parties were growing more frantic with each passing hour. Jack Dawson, a local tracker who had lived in these woods for years, led the charge in looking for the missing child. At first, the search seemed hopeless, no sign of the crash, no tracks leading away from it. But then, something unusual began to surface. Jack, who had seen countless creatures come and go in the wilderness, started noticing strange marks, patterns in the snow, paw prints. Yes, but not from a typical animal. They were larger, more deliberate. And there, Beneath the trees, Jack found something else, the unmistakable signs of a human presence, small, child-sized footprints, only partially obscured by the snow. Jack's eyes narrowed, and a realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. Could it be? Could the child have been taken by the bear? As absurd as that seemed, Jack had heard the old legends, stories of bears who had taken in lost children, but he had always dismissed them as myths. Nothing more than fanciful tales told around campfires. But the clues were undeniable now. The marks, the strange behavior of the bear in the area, and the missing boy, it all pointed to one impossible truth: the bear had taken Max. With a newfound determination, Jack and the rest of the search party followed the trail deeper into the forest. Every step was a struggle. The snow growing thicker, the trees more densely packed. But Jack pressed on. The deeper they went, the more surreal the situation felt. Would they find Max alive? And if they did, would he be with the bear? It was a question that filled Jack with both dread and awe. How had this child survived so long with a creature so wild, so unpredictable? As the hours passed and they neared the heart of the forest, Jack's mind was racing with questions. But he also knew that he had to prepare himself for the unimaginable. He couldn't afford to be unprepared, for the bear could easily turn on them. But the question lingered: if the bear had taken Maximum, what had made it protect him instead of devouring him? In that quiet, cold forest, the mysteries of survival, compassion, and instinct were about to be unraveled in ways Jack couldn't yet understand. And somewhere in the wilderness, Max and the bear shared an unspoken connection that was already changing the course of both their lives. It wasn't until the third day that Jack Dawson finally found the cave. The search had been exhausting, each step through the thick, snow-laden forest a testament to both his perseverance and the uncanny mystery they were chasing. The scent of pine and damp earth filled his nostrils as he moved carefully through the woods, his eyes scanning for any sign of life, human or animal. He had a hunch that the bear wasn't far, and his instincts told him that if he was going to find Maximum, this was the place to look. The cave, nestled at the foot of a rocky outcrop, appeared like any other cave in these mountains, dark, unassuming, and quiet. But as Jack stepped closer, he saw something unusual: the tracks of both a child's small feet and the massive paws of a bear. His heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the sheer impossibility of it all made the hairs on his neck stand up. He approached cautiously, rifle in hand, just in case. The last thing he wanted was a confrontation with the bear. Yet, as he neared the entrance, something surprising happened. He heard a sound, not the growl or huff of an angry bear, but a soft, almost soothing sound. It was a child's voice, quiet but unmistakable. The kind of voice you'd expect to hear playing, laughing in the yard, but this was in the heart of the wild. Stepping inside the cave, Jack froze. There, in the dim light, sat Maximum, a tiny figure in contrast to the giant grizzly that lounged peacefully beside him. The bear, guardian as Jack would later learn, looked up from its resting place, its massive eyes meeting his. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening. Instead, it seemed calm, almost knowing. Maximum, on the other hand, was kneeling on the ground, his small fingers picking at the moss beneath him. He looked up at Jack with wide, trusting eyes. Maximum, Jack whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. He had expected to find the child in some sort of distress, but the boy was surprisingly serene. His clothes were dirted, his hair tangled, but he didn't appear to be scared. Instead, he looked like he belonged there, like he had been living in this strange, wild world for longer than a mere few days. Max didn't answer. He simply gave a soft smile, and then, without any sense of urgency, stood and walked over to the bear. The giant grizzly nuzzled his small head, as though offering comfort. Jack felt a rush of conflicting emotions: relief, confusion, awe. How had this child survived? How had he come to be so at ease with an animal that could, under different circumstances, be a fierce predator. The moments that followed were quiet. Jack moved carefully to Maximum, who was now standing beside Guardian. His hand resting lightly on the bear's fur. He gently scooped Max up into his arms. "We're going home, little buddy," he said softly, his voice shaky. But as Jack began to turn, Guardian shifted slightly, following them with her eyes. Max looked back at the bear, a fleeting look of sorrow crossing his face, as if he knew they were parting from something sacred. Jack, sensing the bond between the child and the bear, stopped. It wasn't just a child and a wild animal. It was something much deeper. The bear had protected Maximum, had kept him safe, had taught him things Jack could never understand. For the first time, Jack questioned what humans truly knew about nature, about the wild, and about animals. Maybe, just maybe, there was something far more profound at play here than mere survival. As they made their way back to town, Jack couldn't shake the thought. How would the world react to this story? How would people understand the connection between a child and a bear that had gone beyond basic instinct, beyond danger and prey, to something so much more intimate and profound? Jack didn't know, but he was about to find out. Back in town, the news of Max's safe return spread like wildfire. The story of a bear protecting a child, carrying him through the wilderness for days, captivated people from all over. Some were skeptical, others fascinated, but all were touched by the improbable nature of it. A bond between human and animal that no one could explain, but one that felt undeniably real. The more the media buzzed, the more Jack began to wonder about the bear, about Guardian. Was she truly just a protector? Or was she something more? What did she see in Max that made her treat him as one of her own? What had been so special about this child? Was it a matter of instinct? Or something else? As Jack pondered these questions, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility that now lay before him, not just to protect Maximum but to understand the full extent of what had happened in that wild, enchanted corner of the world. When Noah was finally brought back to town, no one knew what to expect. The child had been lost in the wilderness for nearly a week, and the sight of him was a mix of both relief and concern. His hair was matted and dirty, his skin pale, and his clothes barely more than tattered remnants of what they had been when he first went missing. But his eyes, those bright, wide eyes, seemed unfazed, as if he had lived through something entirely different from the chaos surrounding him. There was a calm in his gaze, an odd serenity that unsettled those who saw it. Doctors and psychologists were quick to examine Noah, trying to understand what had happened during his time in the wilderness. But no one could quite put their finger on it. His survival was miraculous enough, but it was the subtle changes in his behavior that left everyone baffled. He seemed different, both more aware of his surroundings and strangely disconnected from human norms. Dr. Emily Chen, a child psychologist known for her work on human-animal relationships, was the first to notice the behavioral shift. She had seen cases of trauma before, children who had survived difficult circumstances. But Noah's behavior was unlike anything she had encountered. At first, it was the small things, how he moved. He often crawled on all fours, mimicking the bear-like motions he had learned during his time with Guardian. His movements were smooth, graceful, and oddly familiar, as though he was still part of the wild world he had come from. But it wasn't just his posture. Noah had developed a strange preference for food. While most children would have craved familiar comforts after a traumatic ordeal, Noah seemed drawn to berries, roots, and plants, much like a bear would forage for food. The shift was so drastic that Dr. Chen suspected it wasn't just the trauma of being alone in the wilderness that had affected him, it was something deeper, something more profound. Noah may have imprinted on the bear, she suggested during a meeting with the local authorities and psychologists. What I'm seeing here is something rare, a child who has developed a deep, unconscious bond with the bear, so much so that he is mirroring its behaviors. It's like he's adopted the bear's ways as his own. This idea sent shockwaves through the medical community. The concept of imprinting was known in animals, but not to this extent in humans. It was a theory that no one had anticipated. But as they observed Noah further, his speech patterns began to show signs of it too. He would sometimes grunt, not out of frustration, but almost as though he was trying to communicate like the bear. His words, when he spoke, were slow and deliberate, a mix of human language and bear-like grunts. Noah's odd behavior continued to deepen the mystery, despite his physical return to civilization. There was no denying that part of him had remained with the bear, locked in a bond that no one could fully explain. The boy wasn't just struggling to adapt to human life again, he was relearning what it meant to be human. And, in some ways, he was still trying to live like the bear who had kept him safe. This new reality was harder for some people to accept. A few whispered that Noah was damaged, that his time with the bear had somehow broken him. They said the child wasn't really the same. And perhaps, in some ways, they were right. But there was another truth. One that was harder to define but just as undeniable. Noah had survived against all odds. He had thrived in a wilderness that would have claimed the life of any other child. And maybe, just maybe, that survival wasn't a simple matter of luck. It was the result of something deeper. A bond so pure and profound that it changed him forever. The town, divided between those who felt uneasy and those who marveled at the boy's resilience, had no clear answers. But for those who knew Noah best, who had seen him change in ways they didn't yet fully understand, it was clear there was something sacred in what he had lived through. Something that went beyond the physical realm. There was love. There was empathy. And there was a bond between man and animal that transcended anything they had ever known. Noah might not have been the same child he was before the crash. But he was alive in a way that spoke to something greater. Something more significant than anyone could grasp. The town's debate about the bear's fate was inevitable. The news of Noah's survival, and the extraordinary circumstances that had led to it, spread quickly. People were divided in their opinions. Some viewing the bear as a hero and others seeing it as a dangerous animal that should be removed. As the weeks went by, the question loomed, what should happen to the bear? There were those who wanted the bear relocated, believing it posed too great a risk to the community. They argued that it was unpredictable, having shown such unusual behavior toward Noah. There were fears of other children or animals being at risk. And the idea of leaving the bear in the wild or near human settlements felt too dangerous. But there was another camp that refused to consider euthanizing the bear. They believed it had shown compassion and had played a critical role in saving Noah's life. To them, it wasn't just any animal, it was a symbol of something more profound. Something that transcended human understanding. Jack Dawson, the tracker who had helped find Noah, was in the second camp. He had witnessed firsthand the deep connection between the child and the bear. He had seen the way the bear had carried Noah to safety and how it had nurtured him in the wilderness. Jack knew that no ordinary animal would do such a thing. The bond they shared was not simply survival, it was a bond of mutual respect. Of empathy. Something that most people could barely comprehend. Relocating the bear is not the answer, Jack argued during one of the town meetings, his voice steady but filled with conviction. This bear isn't a threat. It's a hero. It saved Noah. And we have a responsibility to honor that. To understand that. We have to think beyond fear and look at what this situation truly means. Jack's words resonated with some in the room. But not everyone agreed. Some argued that the bear's actions were instinctual. That it wasn't driven by compassion, but by simple survival. But Jack and a few others, including Noah's parents, Michael and Sarah, believed that the bear had acted with a level of awareness that went far beyond animal instinct. In the face of this divide, Jack proposed an alternative, a sanctuary, rather than risk the bear's life by moving it to a distant location. Jack suggested creating a safe space where the animal could be studied and protected. A place where Noah could continue to heal and interact with the bear in a controlled environment. Where both could be protected from the outside world. "I'm not asking for a free pass for the bear," Jack said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm asking for a chance to learn. To understand what happened between this bear and Noah. We've never seen anything like this before. We need to study it. To find out why this bond formed. It could be something we can learn from." There were still many skeptics. But Jack's proposal sparked a discussion that grew into something larger. The town, with all its differences and disagreements, slowly began to come together around the idea of creating Noah's Haven, a sanctuary not just for the bear, but for all the animals in the area. The sanctuary would be a place where humans and animals could coexist. A place where the mysteries of interspecies relationships could be explored. And where nature's complexity could be honored and respected. As the town reached its decision, Noah's recovery continued. Though at a pace that was slower than anyone expected. He was still learning to adapt to the human world. Still struggling with the dissonance between the bear's world and his own. But every time he interacted with the bear, there was a calmness. A sense of belonging. As if they were both healing together. The sanctuary, once an idea that seemed improbable, began to take shape. And with it came a sense of hope, a hope that, perhaps, the bond between man and animal could teach the world something invaluable. For Noah, the sanctuary became a symbol of his connection to Guardian and the life he had lived in the wild. And for the town, it became a symbol of how far humanity could go to understand the complexities of nature, of empathy, and of the deep, mysterious bonds that tie all living beings together. As the sanctuary plans progressed, the town began to feel a sense of unity, united not just by the events of the past, but by a shared understanding of something greater, the power of connection, and the potential for change. The winter months settled over the sanctuary, casting a quiet stillness over the land, as the researchers worked diligently to understand the bond between Noah and the bear. Something entirely unexpected occurred that would shift everything once again. During one of the routine checks, a researcher made a startling discovery. The bear, who had been assumed to be male, was actually female and pregnant. This revelation sent waves of excitement and disbelief through the sanctuary. The researchers had been so focused on the bond between Noah and the bear that they had not considered the possibility of this new development. The discovery opened a new chapter in their research and added layers of complexity to the already intricate relationship between Noah and the bear. At first, the revelation seemed almost impossible. How could they have missed something so significant? The bear, whom they had been observing closely for months, had exhibited no outward signs of pregnancy. She had acted in ways that were protective and nurturing. But they had assumed it was simply part of her natural instincts to care for Noah. They had never considered that this bear might be expecting, or that her maternal instincts might be far more than they had imagined. Noah, too, had mentioned the idea of a bear baby on several occasions, though no one had paid much attention. At the time, his words had been dismissed as the ramblings of a child who had spent too much time in the wilderness. But as the truth came to light, everything began to make sense. Noah had known something they hadn't. The news brought even more attention to the sanctuary, as both scientists and the general public clamored to understand the implications of the discovery. What did it mean for the bond between the bear and Noah? Could the bear's pregnancy have somehow influenced the protective behavior she had shown toward him? Could the bear's pregnancy have been a part of the deeper connection they shared? For Noah, the discovery brought a new sense of peace. He had always felt a profound connection to the bear, but the realization that she was expecting gave him a new sense of purpose. He often spoke of the bear baby in quiet moments, his eyes filled with wonder as he imagined what it would be like. There was a depth of understanding in him that no one could quite explain. His bond with the bear, it seemed, had not only been about survival, it had been about a shared sense of life, of protection, and now, perhaps, even of family. Jack Dawson, who had followed the entire journey from the moment he found Noah, was particularly struck by the implications of the bear's pregnancy. It raised more questions than answers. And Jack, ever the curious observer, found himself contemplating the nature of human and animal relationships on a much deeper level. He believed the connection between Noah and the bear was something more than coincidence. There was a mystery to it. A mystery that had yet to unfold. What if this bond was not just about survival in the wild, but about something far more meaningful, a mutual understanding between two beings that transcended species? A communication that had been fostered over time? The researchers at the sanctuary delved deeper into studying the bear's pregnancy. They noted her behavior toward Noah changed slightly, becoming even more protective. She seemed to recognize that Noah was an integral part of her world, and the presence of her unborn cubs appeared to amplify that feeling of responsibility. She would often nudge Noah toward the areas where she had made her den, as if to show him a safe place. And Noah, in turn, seemed to respond to these gestures with a level of care and consideration that was far beyond his years. As the months passed and the pregnancy progressed, the sanctuary staff began to prepare for the birth of the cubs. It was an event that would not only be significant for the bear but for Noah as well. The entire town became caught up in the excitement, and it was clear that the sanctuary was becoming a symbol of more than just human-animal connection. It was becoming a place of learning, of understanding, and of transformation. The discovery of the bear's pregnancy was a turning point in the story of Noah and the bear. It opened the door to a new chapter in their relationship, one that would bring even more profound insights into the complexities of the natural world. And for Noah, it gave him a deeper connection to the bear and a new understanding of what it meant to be part of a family. No matter the species, it was a bond that transcended the physical world and touched something far more profound, a shared sense of life, of love, and of a future that was still unfolding. The arrival of the cubs marked a profound shift in the dynamics of the sanctuary. In the weeks leading up to the birth, anticipation grew among the sanctuary staff. But no one could have predicted the deep, unspoken bond that would form between Noah and Guardian's cub. It was a bond unlike any other, one that would captivate not only those at the sanctuary but also the world beyond. When Guardian's cubs were finally born, the sanctuary was filled with excitement and wonder. The tiny cubs were a marvel to behold, with their soft fur and curious eyes. But for Noah, the arrival of these cubs was more than just a moment of awe. It was an opportunity for him to deepen his connection with the bear, to understand the natural world even more intimately, and to become a part of something much larger than himself. Guardian, ever protective, was cautious at first, keeping a close eye on Noah as he approached the cubs. But there was a tenderness in her gaze, a quiet understanding that this boy, this human, had a special place in her world. It was a sight to behold, the bear, usually so fierce and solitary, allowing Noah to come close, his small hands gently touching the cubs. In those moments, the sanctuary seemed to pause, as if holding its breath in wonder. Noah's interactions with the cubs were gentle and full of reverence. He would sit quietly beside them, his small hands reaching out to pat their soft fur. Guardian watched closely, but there was no hostility in her stance, only a sense of approval. It was as if she knew that Noah, too, understood the value of life, of family, and of the profound responsibility that came with nurturing the next generation. What was most remarkable, however, was the way Guardian herself seemed to soften around Noah. She had always been protective of him, but now there was a shift. She no longer viewed him as just the child she had once rescued. Noah had become a part of her family, a member of her pack, in a way that defied natural order. It was as though the bond between them had transcended the physical realm, reaching into something much deeper, something that spoke of mutual respect and understanding. For Noah, the experience was transformative. He had always felt a unique connection to the bear. But now, with the cubs, he found himself stepping into a role he had never imagined. He was no longer just an observer, he was a part of this new family, guiding the cubs in a way that felt instinctive and natural. He would often mimic Guardian's actions, watching her tenderly care for her cubs, then trying to replicate her movements. gently nudging the cubs closer to safety. He was, in many ways, learning to care for them in the same way Guardian had cared for him. The bond between Noah and the cubs grew stronger with each passing day. He would spend hours with them, observing their playful antics and helping to keep them safe. It was clear to everyone at the sanctuary that Noah had formed a deep connection with the cubs, much like the one he had shared with Guardian. The sanctuary, once a place of research and curiosity, had now become a symbol of something far more profound, a place where the lines between human and animal had blurred, and where love, empathy, and connection had become the guiding principles of life. The staff at the sanctuary were in awe of what they were witnessing. They had come to study the relationship between Noah and the bear. But what they were observing now was something far greater, a harmonious coexistence between species, built on trust, compassion, and mutual respect. The story of Noah, Guardian, and her cubs spread quickly, capturing the hearts of people around the world. It became a symbol of the potential for understanding between humans and animals, a story of empathy and love that transcended boundaries. Noah's connection with the cubs also brought new insights into the research being conducted at the sanctuary. Scientists had long debated the nature of human-animal interactions, but now they were witnessing something that was both unprecedented and profound. The way Noah interacted with the cubs, the way he cared for them and protected them, spoke volumes about the potential for deeper connections between species. It was clear that there was more to these relationships than mere survival or instinct. It was about love, trust, and a shared understanding of the world. As Noah continued to care for the cubs, he began to develop a deeper sense of responsibility. He no longer saw himself as a passive observer in the wild, he saw himself as a caretaker, a protector, a member of a larger family. The sanctuary, once a place of recovery, had now become a place of growth, both for the bears and for Noah. This extraordinary bond between Noah, Guardian, and her cubs marked a new chapter in their journey. It was a chapter filled with love, compassion, and a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. And as the story of Noah and the bears continued to unfold, it became clear that their journey was just beginning. Together, they would change the way the world viewed human-animal relationships, showing that love and empathy could bridge even the widest of divides. The serenity of the sanctuary was soon threatened by a harsh reality. After months of unusually high temperatures and little rainfall, the once abundant water sources that supported the sanctuary and its wildlife began to dry up. Streams that had once flowed freely now lay barren, and the lush green forest that surrounded the bears' home began to wither under the relentless sun. The staff at Noah's Haven watched with growing concern as the drought took hold, threatening the survival of the animals and the sanctuary itself. For Noah, the crisis was more than just a logistical problem. It was a test of the bond he had built with the bears. He had always felt connected to the land, to the animals. But now, with the land suffering, he felt an urgency to act. He couldn't just sit back and watch as everything he had come to love and protect began to fade away. One afternoon, as he sat near the now dry streambed, Noah saw Guardian and her cubs approach the area. They seemed disoriented, hesitant, as though they, too, sensed the gravity of the situation. Guardian, typically so confident and self-assured, paused before the dry riverbed, her powerful frame casting a shadow over the barren land. The cubs, no older than a few months, nuzzled against her, seeking comfort. Noah felt a rush of empathy as he watched them. He knew that the bears, with all their strength and instincts, could still be as vulnerable as anyone else in times of hardship. The thought that the sanctuary, this place that had come to mean so much to him, to Guardian, and to the others, could be at risk filled him with a deep sense of responsibility. He couldn't allow the animals, and the sanctuary, to suffer. He approached Guardian carefully, a silent plea in his heart. As he stood before her, the bond they shared seemed to pull him closer to her. Without thinking, Noah knelt beside the ground, placing his hands on the dry earth. It was in that moment that something extraordinary happened. Noah's gaze softened, his eyes narrowing as if sensing something beneath the surface. He stood, his heart racing, and looked at Guardian. With a quiet determination, Noah began to communicate with her, his hands moving in subtle gestures as he mimicked the movements of the bears. It was a silent conversation, one based on trust and understanding, not words. He motioned toward the ground, making digging motions with his hands. Guardian, who had always been attuned to his presence, seemed to understand. Her large paws dug into the earth, and Noah, with a sense of purpose, joined her. The two of them worked together, side by side, their movements in sync. The cubs, curious but uncertain, watched from a distance. With each passing minute, Noah and Guardian's joint efforts seemed to uncover something, an underground stream, buried deep beneath the soil. The earth began to give way, and as the rocks were cleared, cool, fresh water began to trickle out. It was a small miracle, but to the staff and animals of the sanctuary, it was everything. The news of Noah and Guardian's discovery spread quickly through the sanctuary. It was more than just a victory over the drought, it was a symbol of what could be achieved when human and animal worked together, understanding each other in ways that went beyond speech or conventional communication. It was a breakthrough not only in survival but in the deeper understanding of human-animal relationships. For Noah, this moment of cooperation with Guardian felt like a profound lesson. He realized that, just as they had both relied on each other for survival, there was a deeper interdependence between the human world and the animal world. The drought had not only tested the sanctuary's physical limits, it had tested their understanding of what it meant to live in harmony with nature. This groundbreaking event did more than secure a water source for the sanctuary. It shifted public perception of Noah's haven, turning it into a beacon for both conservation and interspecies cooperation. The protesters who had once opposed the sanctuary began to reconsider their stance, seeing the animals and humans working together in ways that they had never imagined. The sanctuary was no longer just a place of refuge for bears, it had become a symbol of the future of conservation. Noah, once again, had proven that the bond between humans and animals could transcend boundaries. And just as Guardian had once rescued him, it was now he who had come to the bear's aid. Together, they had created a lasting change, not just for their sanctuary, but for the world's understanding of what it meant to live in harmony with nature. As the drought began to ease and the water source continued to flow, Noah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. The lesson had been learned through empathy, communication, and cooperation. Even the most insurmountable challenges could be overcome. And in this newfound unity between human and animal, Noah saw the future, one where they would continue to face the hardships of life together, stronger and more connected than ever before. Years passed, and the once young boy who had been found alone in the forest, saved by a grizzly bear, was now a teenager. Noah had grown not only in age but in wisdom. The sanctuary, Noah's haven, had flourished under the careful guidance of Jack Dawson and the dedicated staff. It had become a symbol of human-animal cooperation, a place where researchers and conservationists from around the world gathered to study and learn from the extraordinary bond between Noah and the bears. But Noah knew that his journey was far from over. It was just beginning. The world had changed since the days of the drought crisis. The sanctuary, though still somewhat controversial, had proven time and time again that human intervention could be both compassionate and beneficial when done with respect for nature. Noah had become the face of this movement, a symbol of hope for a world struggling to balance progress with environmental conservation. As Noah stood at the edge of the sanctuary one evening, gazing at the setting sun that painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, he reflected on all that had happened. He thought about Guardian, the bear who had saved his life, and the cubs she had raised in the very sanctuary where he had learned the true meaning of connection. He thought about the breakthroughs, the discoveries, The way the world had started to listen to the lessons taught by a bond between a child and a bear. Now, Noah had decided to take those lessons beyond the borders of the sanctuary. With the support of Jack and the researchers at Noah's Haven, he had begun planning an international expedition. One that would take him to places around the globe where endangered species were struggling to survive. Noah was determined to share the message of the sanctuary, how the bond between humans and animals could lead to mutual survival, respect, and understanding. As he prepared for the journey, Noah felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This wasn't just a trip, it was a mission. His goal was to work alongside conservationists, indigenous communities, and local governments to protect wildlife in regions where habitat loss, poaching, and climate change were pushing species to the brink of extinction. With his unique understanding of animals, especially bears, Noah believed he could make a difference, just as he had made a difference at Noah's Haven. In the years leading up to this moment, Noah had found his voice. His time spent with Guardian and the other animals had taught him patience, empathy, and the importance of listening. The way he had communicated with Guardian, through actions and trust rather than words, had shaped his worldview. He knew that to protect the world's endangered species, he needed to go beyond the science and look at the emotional and psychological connections humans could forge with animals. The day of his departure came sooner than expected. As Noah stood at the gate of the sanctuary, his heart swelled with emotion. He looked around at the bears, the trees, the staff who had become like family to him, and, of course, he looked at Jack, who had been there from the very beginning. Jack's weathered face broke into a smile, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You've come a long way, Noah," Jack said, his voice thick with pride. "The world needs you now. Go show them what you've learned." With a final glance back at the sanctuary, Noah boarded the plane that would take him to new horizons. He was leaving behind the place that had shaped him, but he was carrying with him the lessons it had taught him. The legacy of Noah's Haven was not just about the sanctuary itself, but about the ripple effect it had created across the world, a movement toward understanding, compassion, and coexistence. Over the next several months, Noah traveled across continents, working with teams in Africa to protect elephants from poaching, in the Amazon to conserve the rainforests, and in the Arctic to study polar bears affected by climate change. Everywhere he went, he applied the lessons he had learned from Guardian and the bears. He spoke about the deep, profound connections humans could form with animals, connections that transcended species and that were capable of saving not just individuals, but entire ecosystems. Noah's mission was not without its challenges. He faced opposition from those who saw his approach as idealistic, but he remained steadfast. Through each struggle, he continued to advocate for the importance of empathy and understanding in conservation. His bond with the animals and his ability to communicate with them in ways that others couldn't had set him apart as a leader in the movement. As Noah's journey continued, the world began to take notice. His work was celebrated by conservationists and environmentalists alike. And slowly, the world began to understand the power of the deep emotional connection between humans and the natural world. In time, the sanctuary became a model for others, a place where future generations could learn how to live in harmony with nature, just as Noah had learned so many years ago. Now, as Noah's Haven celebrated its 10th anniversary, Noah stood once again at the sanctuary, but this time, as a leader of a global movement. The legacy of his bond with Guardian and the other bears had spread far beyond the borders of the sanctuary, and as he gazed out at the animals he had dedicated his life to protecting, Noah knew that the future of the world depended on continuing the journey, one that would carry on the lessons of empathy, love, and coexistence for generations to come.